Good points, Larry. Thank you. Well, I would start off as the number one priority is getting Bermudians back to work. Larry tells us we don't know the statistics, but it's high. There are a lot of underemployed people. And in any democratic society, we can't have this group of unemployed people. So we need incentives immediately, I think, to get people back to work. If it's incentives through payroll tax reductions for incremental hires, it's more training, coaching, sending people abroad for programs. We need to get Bermudians to work and save some of the social fabric of the country. Number two is we need to keep attracting foreign capital, and as we said earlier, this economy is certainly making that difficult. But there are ways to do it, making it easier to do business here, being more accommodating, and making those returns that investors can see better. So I think that has got to be our second priority, and you've made that point too, I know, as well, Larry and Sir John. And lastly, I think we need to protect our debt rating. We were just downgraded from a AA to an A-, and it's a slippery slope as you start down the way, as John said, to Barbados or something else. So I think that is a very important aspect of this economy to prove to people that this is a good, safe jurisdiction. And I think debt ratings are a way that send that message. That starts with government finance. There's a lot to be done there. It's hard to do it in a tough economy, as all the economies around the world are showing. But over time, we have to assume that revenues aren't going up. How do we get costs under control? And how do we balance the budget? And I think there are a lot of things associated with that. If it's privatization to get some of these businesses off the government's books and let Bermudians own businesses, all kinds of strategies to look at how government works and serves Bermudians better. So those would be my three priorities.
It's not lost on me that there's nothing but men sitting up here. And if we're talking about the future now. You know, in the past, I mean, people like me screwed things up. And it's unlikely that people like me are going to have the solution. It's going to take a joint effort. So hopefully the next time you have one of these conferences, you'll have proportional representation, if you know what I mean. In my opening remarks, where I sort of downplayed or criticized growth as being the metric by which we should judge our success. In its place, I'd like to suggest a word I got from the author of The Black Swan, Nassim Taleb, robustification. To make something robust. When I think about Bermuda, or if you think about Bermuda in a historical context, our architecture, everything about Bermuda deals with robustness. We spend an inordinate amount of money on our homes, on our roofs, because we prepare for the worst case scenario. If the bankers had done something like that, we wouldn't have had a financial crisis in 2008, but let's not go there. So when I think about a robust economy for the future, firstly, it should be diversified. And we've gone some way to diversifying our economy. We're fond of thinking of international business and tourism, but the second largest earner of foreign currency in Bermuda is investment income. Investment income from Bermudian savings. Bermudians are great savers. They're great investors. So much so that prior to the recession in 2008, we were earning about $800 million in investment income from rents, from bonds, from stocks. And so without any government interference, or basically government staying out of the way, individual Bermudians were able to erect a third pillar. Obviously, that third pillar has come under threat now because stock dividends are down, rents are down. But diversification, for sure. The second part, I think, of robustification has to do with moving us off of our fossil fuel economy and growing green shoots. Renewable energy is an important part of the future of Bermuda. It will help us develop independence. We're not talking political independence here, we're talking about the real stuff. The kind of stuff that our forefathers thought about when they were building their homes. Putting a water supply, a tank on the property, putting a cesspit on the property so that the property stood alone, yet still connected to a neighborhood. So when I think about the future, that's the way I think we should build our economy. Take a page out of the book of Victorian Bermudians in terms of the strength which and the redundancies which they built into their life systems. The second very important one is to do with investment. We've been talking about, well, how are we going to fund new hotels? Well, the 60-40 rule has to change. And to my way of thinking, the Minister of Finance should be given discretionary powers to allow for exemptions. There are a number of publicly traded companies on the Bermuda Stock Exchange that could be given exemptions today. The public utility, Belco is one, some of the insurance companies. The banks have already been given exemptions, but the influx, finding ways to get capital into Bermuda. To this point, we've been a debt sort of financed economy. We need to get more equity in, and getting rid of that 60-40 rule, or at least giving the Minister of Finance discretionary powers to waive the 60-40 rule, I think is something that needs to be implemented as in yesterday. That's it for me.
You've heard the first part of what was talked about, some of the things that were wrong that need to be corrected. Now we're talking about some of the things we need to correct to make Bermuda whole again. And there's no sense getting very esoteric about it. Get practical. We've lost a good chunk of our GDP. And we know that the restoring of GDP creates jobs. And our people at the moment, and I say our people, I feel sorry for the foreigner who's been working here and felt as though Bermuda was this paradise. All of a sudden his boss says, go home. And he goes home to miserable weather in Connecticut or New Hampshire. But the Bermudian goes home to a miserable household that they don't want to be in because, you know, that's why they left to go to work. But they can't find work. So we've got to restore jobs in Bermuda. And jobs will start to solve some of the social problems that are emerging. And more will emerge if we don't solve that problem. And I think we just have to be practical and go to government and say, what are the things that will help to restore jobs? And since we have switched to a financial service economy, you know, what is that saying? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can't, the wisdom to understand the difference. Well, there are things we can change, and we've got to have the courage to change those things. And we've got to make noise about it. That's why I talked about the conversation about those things that was mentioned, the 60-40. Not only the Minister of Finance shouldn't be given the discretion because biasness sets in right away. We should define where we're going to allow a 60-40 to take place. And so the Bermuda people traveling around the world can say, yeah, you can come to Bermuda as long as you meet this criteria. You're in. We need capital. We need intellect that knows how to use that capital. And we need product. The fumbling around now with Apple phones that was closed down one shop and they've given it to somebody else because it didn't match the 60-40 arrangement. We're doing ourselves in. You know, Japan has stayed in a recession for 20-something years because it refused to invite young people that could offer them ideas how to change. When it comes to the hotel industry, who wants to come to boring Bermuda and be with a bunch of people squabbling amongst themselves, surly at the airport, surly at the hotels? And why? Because everybody feels as they're entitled to the job, but they don't really have to do the job, so they don't have to put themselves into it. We talk about old Bermuda, let's go back to being old Bermuda. Yeah, when old Bermuda was around, you didn't do your job, you were fired, somebody else was giving you a job. Today you can't get fired because the union closed down the business. So, you know, we've got to have a conversation with the unions, with the government, with the business people, and we've got to sort of decide what is it we're going to do. But we talked about a casino in Bermuda. We've been talking about it for 6 years. I remember vaguely when Singapore, Kenya, and Jamaica received independence. Same time. Those who were prepared, the one that was prepared to change and stay current is the most success story in the world. Take a look at Kenya today. They're already now sending 4 members of their government to The Hague to be tried. Take a look at Jamaica, whose currency now, what is it, 100, almost 100 Jamaican dollars to $1 US. And there's Singapore, who is now a sovereign wealth country. How did they do it? They changed, and they recognized that they had to be disciplined. And that's what we have to do. We've got to bring about. Singapore said, Macau is having this success with the casino, and we can't sit here and do it, not do it if we don't want to have the tourists, or have our people running over to Macau to give them the money. So they built a casino. Switzerland's done the same thing. Switzerland changes. Who ever heard of Swiss, the most conservative country in the world? They have 5 cantons that have casinos. And we're talking about putting casinos on cruise boats. And what are we going to say to the tourists that are in those hotels? What are we going to say to Bermudians who want jobs? The government says, we want jobs for Bermudians. Yet we're prepared to entertain the idea that we should put casinos on cruise boats. You can hire Bermudians on those cruise boats. They're going to have next is entertainment. You can't hire the Bermudian for entertainment. So what's the purpose? You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. You're either pregnant, you can't be half pregnant, you're either pregnant. So we need to, and I'm not going to go through, I mean, Belco needs help. It needs capital. It needs capital for planning. We need to be on top of it. We need technology and communication. We need to bring the foreigners in here who's got the money to help we Bermudians, the 50,400 of us that are restored. And we need to have that conversation around this country. If you listen to those talk shows, they're not about sustainability or replacement. They're about bitching and moaning and talking about things that are not very sensible, number one, and they're not very relevant, number two. And we need to have a relevant conversation so that the message is out there to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. And I think if we start to do that, we'll start to open up this process. And what we've got to do, the biggest thing, I'll leave you with this. It was Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, during the heat of the war, when everything looked like it was falling apart, when he said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And why you don't talk? Because you're always afraid of what government might think. You're always afraid of what government might do, might cut off your work permits. They can't afford to cut off your work permits when they cut your work permits off. They cut off their revenue. If they don't understand that, they're in trouble. So I say to you that you speak up and the country will find its way through the process.
Thank you. It's comforting to know my work permit is safe. I'd like to, since we ended on the casinos, I just want to go a little bit in depth on that because we actually got a lot of questions on this, and it's more in particular. So if the panel can actually weigh in if they're in favor or not when we go through this and why, that would be good. And I'll give you each a chance to respond. And some of the specific questions we've got is, who would own and operate the casinos? Who could gamble in them? What would your target sector be? And how many casinos would you suggest? And what taxes could be paid? And what services could be provided to the social issues that might evolve as a result of having a casino? I know that's a plethora of questions, but maybe we can just briefly speak to those. Mr. John?
John, they're good questions. I'd go to Singapore and say, what have you done? And I'd bring the answers back to Bermuda. I wouldn't even try to invent them ourselves, but I would tell you this much. I don't believe in discrimination. Race, color, creed, or money. And therefore, why should a Bermudian not be able to go there? He might have to get a license to get in there because we want to sort of make sure that they don't abuse what they have. So there's enough technology around to prevent them from just walking in and spending their money. If they have a credit problem, then the Gaming Commission, who issues a license, electronically would revoke that license. So, but you cannot say to, and because I had the experience once going to London on a plane, arriving at Heathrow Airport, a Bermudian that I thought I grew up with. The person was white, I was black. And they finally get ready to go and clear customs. And the person says, oh, by the way, I've got a British passport. I'll see you later. I'm going to go through this way. And I realized then, it wasn't, they didn't intend to hurt my feelings. But they hurt my feelings because they wouldn't even stand in line with me to wait through this ungodly line to get through all these people to get in. And I was hurt. But to me, that was a form of discrimination. Not intended, but it was a form of discrimination. I don't believe in discrimination. And therefore, I could not deprive of me who meets the criteria. But I would ask Singapore about all the other questions, because they have the answer, because they built up 2 hotels and a casino on top of it. Sent a loud message to the world. And by the way, 3.5 years was paid for. And by the way, the only thing I would say is, that casino belongs to the people of Bermuda. It should not belong to any one individual.
I'd just like to weigh in on this, Vinay, because the interesting thing about this question is that it speaks to the very matter of that restrictive mindset that I spoke of earlier. We're going to have casinos, now how can we restrict? Can we not let Bermudans come in? How can we do this? How can we ring fence this thing? That's old tourist Bermuda thinking. If we are in, as we actually are, in business Bermuda, and if we have a population that is made up of Bermudians working and non-Bermudians also working here, are we really going to discriminate against Bermudians while all those foreigners can walk into this place and gamble? It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense in tourist Bermuda. It certainly doesn't make sense in business Bermuda. Am I in favor of casinos? Yep. They might generate some new revenue, might generate some new jobs, although jobs isn't a major problem. And it's another leg. What difference will it make? 100 million or so? Probably blowing that annually on debt service now.
Not a lot to add to that. I'd support a couple nice high-end casinos affiliated with hotels. As I said earlier, might be a way to incent someone to build a new hotel here, but I don't think it's a massive job creator, as you said.
I'll pass.
And by the way, I don't think casinos are going to make a lot of money for us. But I think what they're going to do is they're going to send a message that we've changed and we're prepared to be more open and not so xenophobic and fearful about things that really... New York will have casinos, by the way, pretty soon. Pennsylvania already has them. Florida is now discussing having them. We're going to be the oddball out. Why?
There won't be any gamblers left after those casinos open up.
There's been a lot of questions kind of getting down to some specifics for our competitive advantage. So regionally and cultural differences remain, but national borders are becoming increasingly irrelevant to economic trends. They should actually be considered accidental constructs that really just surround the supply-demand dynamics. International trade, therefore, is becoming less about trade between nations and more about worldwide demand for a specific product or service. So what is the unique product or service Bermuda can offer internationally? What is our competitive advantage versus, say, Cayman or Panama?
I'll take that. As an offshore financial center, Bermuda takes advantage of the inadequacies of the nation state. So for example, the United States has a boundary, they've got people. The people don't always work in the U.S., they may work somewhere else. The people of the United States may own a business in the U.S. and they may outsource certain activities in other places. And this capital, this money, sensibly doesn't understand national borders. And so offshore financial centers like Bermuda can take advantage of the fiscal policies or the tax policies of the nation state. So for example, in the US, you've got corporate profits tax. And if you don't like paying tax, you can always find yourself a tax haven that will, like us, exploit the inadequacies of the nation state. And so Bermuda, I think, is well poised to take advantage of that, especially in light of the turmoil or the mountains of public debt that have been run up around the world. because I think we're entering a new age of what some call financial repression. The last era of financial repression would have come after the Second World War, when large public debts were run up, and the government, in trying to pay off those debts, increased tax rates, and of course scared off all the rich people. And that led to the evolution or the creation of the Eurodollar market. Well, if you believe in history repeating itself, I think we're poised for that, because it looks like tax rates in the UK and the US and throughout the OECD are poised to go up, especially those on the rich. The rich have pissed everybody off, and the nation state will try and capture some of the wealth of the richest 1%. And here's Bermuda. So I think we're poised to benefit from the coming financial repression. So go nation state, tax the wealthy, tax companies, and we'll benefit.
But we have to lay down the conditions beforehand, let them know they're welcome, let them know that we will serve their purpose, and as we serve our own purpose, we'll serve their purpose. And that's the hurdle we have to get over, because there's no sense saying they're going to come to Bermuda, and we haven't defined and offered the things that they want to come to Bermuda, because if not, they'll go to Cayman, or they'll go somewhere else, and we'll keep hearing about them going somewhere else, or go to Switzerland, and not coming to Bermuda. So, you know, we do have competition, by the way. Ireland is coming out, Ireland is working its way out of its debt problem. It's got growth. In fact, when I look at the chart that Larry produced, we're still going like this. Ireland's going way down, and now it's starting to come back up again. And it's offering all sorts of incentives for people to come to Ireland. And so we're not the only show in town, but we can be the smartest show in town if we change. And that's why I keep going back to, we need to have the conversation about what are we going to offer these people? Tourism in a classical cruise ship, a classical hotel setting might not necessarily, well, our tourists might be, by the way, permanent residents living in condos in certain key spots where hotels are. And where they bring their wealth and they operate their wealth from those hotels or those condos or small offices in town. We don't need that many of them, but we need enough that's going to make our GDP grow and make our people be employed, because they will hire people. Well, we've got to get rid of the tax so that they can bring their yachts and their planes to Bermuda and park them without being taxed.
I can just make supporting what Sir John is saying, is that Bermuda's needs are not huge. We use the word international business, but in fact, if we look at what constituted the core of our international business, it actually was insurance and reinsurance. And there wasn't a plethora of companies. There were a few major companies here doing business globally. And that is the business that has been shrinking. And alongside of that, other bits have been shrinking. So what we need to do to replace that, if they continue shrinking, is add on more niche businesses, probably, that will base here and operate from here, selling its services or offering its services globally. We don't need 10,000. We probably need about 5,000 to 6,000 people, maybe 7,000 people working in IB, supported by the rest of Bermuda. And that takes us back to excellent health and good growth. That can be anything. We've got new things developing out there. India is a booming thing. China's booming. Maybe there are a lot of Chinese billionaires who want to start hiding their money from the Chinese government. Maybe that can be our new niche. But the point is, we don't need to grab the whole world. We need a slice of what's going out there, but we need to suck it here. It must come here. There's no point in our having a theoretical company, these SPIs here, and not giving any jobs.
Sorry, Mr. Pritchard. I was told that there is someone that has a question from the floor. Okay, go ahead.
Perhaps unusual in that I'm a Bermudian who's lived away for the past 10 years in London, and I've returned to Bermuda recently. So I'm coming back with a different sort of view on Bermuda and its economy. Certainly one of the things I hear is that there's discussions around tourism, there's discussions around gambling. I mean, the fact of the matter is, from what I can see, is that with us being one of the most remote islands in the world, and having a success in tourism at times of when you use ships to get to places and use short-range planes to get to places, Bermuda had great growth in tourism because it was relatively close to the east coast of America. But with the drop of that, and tourism being much more of a global market, which is a lot more competitive jurisdictions than this, we've seen a fall in tourism. We've still invested in wanting tourism to grow, build more hotels, bring in gambling. But we have a large group of people who've had careers and long lives in tourism who are now looking at themselves unemployed. Yes, they've got a sense of entitlement. They had great jobs, and that's disappeared. We have a growing government. I'm sure Mr. Birchall can tell you that since the last census, it's grown manifold in the growth of the people who are working for government. We are in a labor government where they're supporting people who need support through quangos, through government, and so forth. But we look at our world today, electronic commerce of any sort, whether it's technology or finance or insurance, is what we're close to because it doesn't involve distance. Insurance is growing globally. In a down market, people turn to insure. We've seen insurance grow globally, but we seem to see it falling off here. And having worked in a similar field to this in the UK, I'd have to say that we need to make ourselves more agile, more our compliance to allow businesses to work here to be more effective. We have them leaving to go to markets where the taxes will be higher. So
excuse me, sir, do you have a question?
Okay. I have a question.
Okay.
Let me get to it.
Okay.
Okay. So my question to you is, how do we make the Bermuda laws more effective for businesses here? How do we look at actually making it so that we get more financial revenue coming in, as opposed to the barriers to business we're putting up and watching them walk away?
Okay.
One of the things, we need to do, first of all, and I hope that we will stand behind those non-Bermudians, we need them to speak up. They were silenced until you want to be in Bermuda, you want to run your business, but stay out of our business. Yet they were the people handing us our bread and butter. But we said, give us your money, but don't give us your opinion. So the culture of free enterprise was killed just in that process. Because some of the best brains, let's face it, we Bermudians, some of us got a little bit of brains, but none of us have a lot. When you look at some of these guys that came here with international ideas, and that goes back, by the way, since 1935, when the first Swedish mesh company came for liquidation, and a very brilliant lawyer bought the idea to Bermudians. They said, fine, if you think it will work, we'll support it. And it worked, and international business started in Bermuda. When you look at Fred Rice bringing the insurance business to Bermuda, the captive insurance business to Bermuda, and you look at the people who bought the other forms of business, whether reinsurance, insurance business, they were all foreigners. And yet we run around acting like somehow we created all this, and all this is ours, and we should have control of it. And I hear your point, Don, there, because what we've done is we have cut them off. And we've got to get them back engaged. If they represent 30% of our workforce, how can you tell 30% of your workforce, don't be a participant in the opinion process of a place in which we need you? So we've got to make the point I'm making is got to make a big turnaround. And we're not going to get tourists. My wife actually said to me just 2 nights ago, she said, Joe, why can't we get golfers from a beautiful place like Bermuda? I said, number one, the airfare here is still too high. Number two, they got golf courses all over America. I will not talk about golf courses in Bermuda. We think Port Royal is a wonderful golf course. Well, it's a second-rate golf course compared to many golf courses, many golf courses in the United States. They get at the airport, and they're not treated with the courtesy that they'd get treated in an airport in their own country. They get in the cab, and they get taken to a hotel, and what happens? The cab driver pushes the button and says, you go take your stuff out the back there, and by the way, still tip me. They go in a hotel, see something wrong, and the person says, in fact, this happened. The person said, Hey, by the way, I'll get a mop for you, mop it up, because they spilled some, they dropped the soda on the floor, We are not very pleasant people anymore. We used to be very pleasant. We're not anymore. And we're not been pleasant to the tourists, and we're not been pleasant to the international people. We correct that. And I can tell you now, we're back in business, because the business wants to come here, but not coming unless we offer something first. We got to make the first step.
Fly with honey, not vinegar.
Like what?
Catch a fly with honey, not vinegar.
That's right.
Joining on with, go Craig.
Sir John seems to have assumed my title of Dr. Doom. I'm happy to say that I've got a halo over my head, and I think everything is wonderful. We've been talking about international business being in a tailspin, and I talked about a piece of information, the balance of payments, that I think is a better metric for measuring our economic success than GDP. Well, I'm looking at the balance of payments figures, and when you look under, well, the balance of payments are organized into two major accounts, the current account and the capital account. It's the current account that we're really talking about. And then under the current account, it divides into payments and receipts. Payments is what we pay out to, we're taking a taxi across Manhattan, that constitutes a payment. If an international business person takes a cab from Fairmount Hamilton to Fairmount Southampton, that's a receipt. And to my mind, not much has changed since then. The fundamentals that were in place in 2007 and created a first-rate insurance domicile are still here. The human capital that makes Bermuda a top-rate insurance domicile is to a large extent still here. And really, to my way of thinking, we just don't have to screw it up anymore. So I'm optimistic about the future. Yes, we are having some of our challenges, but I don't know that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's really, for me, about tweaking the system. Term limits thing, yeah, we need to get on with that. But I suppose I'm not as pessimistic as my fellow panelists when it comes to international business.
Just like to weigh in, because I think it is an important point, because it's very interesting now. Craig's referring to information from 2010. It's 2012. The whole year of 2011 has gone past us. Something happened in 2011. We'll probably get that report mid-2012, by which time we're looking at 2013. Our economy is declining because our residential population is declining. It's one of the three components that makes an economy stay flat or grow. International business is shrinking. They are laying off. So incomes are declining. The fact that it might look marginal in 2010 figures doesn't mean very much to the persons who lost their jobs, who got notice of their jobs on Monday, just gone, and the people who will get notice of jobs being lost in the months to come. That's what matters. Our information gap is so bad that some of our figures are 2 years behind, and we're trying to get into next year. We've got a major problem, and the Standard & Poor's report, its skeleton report, had 3 references to information problems and data gaps. It's a problem I've been hitting all the time. I've been living with for 2 years, so John and I are acutely aware of it. The fact is that the changes that are occurring are happening. Incomes are declining. They're just not being reported on until 2 years hence. And that's really not good enough in this complex economy. Back to our other point. The tourists came for 5 days. The other guy's coming for 360 days. If a man's going to be in, or a person's going to be in your house for 360 days a year, there has to be a different relationship. And there will be. They will complain ultimately about something. They will comment ultimately about something. And we have to adjust to that. We are not in the tourist business anymore. We're out of it. We are in Business Park Bermuda. And we've been there since 1994, and we are not going back to tourist Bermuda. We've got to let the old queen go.
Gentlemen, recognizing that we have overstayed our welcome, I'd like to offer, if you would allow at least one more question.
Yeah, one question. Good evening. I'd like to ask, has anyone considered the impact of the U.S. base pulling out of Bermuda had on the overall economy of Bermuda? Because living in St. George, I can tell you, when you call us a ghost town, we have not replaced that traffic. So I'd like to ask any of you, if you will address what you believe happened when the U.S. base closed in Bermuda.
the taxpayer of the United States, country United States, stopped funding our tourist industry. That was thing number one. We were receiving millions of dollars of foreign aid from the taxpayer of the U.S., but nobody was telling the taxpayer that. I recognize that St. George is a ghost town. I was down there before Christmas. And Mayor, you and I had words about that. But look carefully, as I do, when you walk around this city of Hamilton. Look carefully at what is open and what is not open. Hamilton is tending towards the ghostliness of St. George's, but it is camouflaged at present. Look at your town as you walk around it. I do it.
In fact, if you didn't have as many people working in international companies that leave those offices, come out, and then go back, in fact, most of the offices nowadays serve meals right in the offices. They didn't even come out as much as they used to come out. So you're right, and Craig, I was not trying to be a pessimist. I was trying to be a person who says, wake up, pay attention, something is happening that's going to impact on all of us. And before it really does a real severe damage, we all need to address it, and that is what is happening to Bermuda. Maybe because I rent to many international companies, and all I see in those companies I rent to is not any growth, not one growth. I see shrinkage in those companies. So I'm on the ground with those companies, and more importantly, I see the managers of those companies, the top guys, the real decision makers, now living in New York, or living in Switzerland, or living somewhere else. And we become branches. One time we were ACE and XL and Allied World, and all these companies had the top people in Bermuda. They've all left. That's why donations will fall and impact will, because they're not making decisions about growth, they're making decisions about what we can get out of Bermuda, but not what we're going to do to enhance the atmosphere that we have around us. So we keep thinking that we are critical mass and people need us. When they've said, if you can't give us what we want, this term work permit thing, they've said, whenever we have a problem with immigration, we just simply pack up departments, and with technology, we move and we just keep what we want in Bermuda for the benefit. That's it. Nothing else.
And on that happy note.
Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time. We're cognizant of your time. We first and foremost, of course, would like to thank our panelists for a very stimulating hour and a half. And gentlemen, thank you very much. We do apologize for the sound problems we've had. Unfortunately, our technician left the room and didn't return. So for any inconvenience, a little plug though for the Bermuda channel, the business channel has taped the entire evening, and it will be streaming it live on the Bermuda channel, business channel, so look out for that. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you, our members and non-members, for your support for the Economics Division of the Chamber of Commerce, for your chamber.
Great job.
We're thrilled to see so many of you out here tonight, and we look forward to continuing our engagement with you over the coming challenging year. Thank you all, and good night.